All right, it's top of the hour. A very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's such a pleasure to welcome you all to this masterclass on impactful rewards, employee wellness in focus, brought to you by SHRM in partnership with the Advantage Club. I'm Nitya Vijay Kumar from the Knowledge and Advisory Services at SHRM and your host for the day. Audience, please note that this session is coming to you as a webcast and hence we have disabled the audio and video. However, this should not deter you from asking your questions through chat. And as your host, I will get as many answered by the speakers here for you as possible. It has been over a year and the definition of the new normal continues to evolve. As people all over the world adjust to these rapidly shifting paradigms, the impact of the ongoing global health crisis on our well-being has been undeniable. People have been driven towards prioritizing their health and mental well-being over much else. A more practical and optimistic way of saying this would be that COVID has, in a way, pushed the rightful importance for physical and mental well-being. With the onset of the pandemic, working from home went from being a privilege to a necessity. And this shift came with risk to employee well-being and a new kind of burnout driven by feelings of isolation, job insecurity, and the blurring of boundaries between work and personal life. As everyone began to explore these uncharted waters of remote working and virtual workspaces, leaders globally are being prompted to reevaluate their employee experience strategies to navigate through this dynamic hybrid work arrangement. Integration of employee wellness in the overall employee experience strategy has, of course, gained a lot of importance. The realm of rewards and recognition is thus widening to integrate meaningful and relevant programs. In this era, the rewards and recognition policies are essentially driven not only by rewarding performance, but much, much more. It's my pleasure to invite Mr. Arvind Srikantan, Senior Business Partner, HR Transformation at Societe Generale Global Solution Center to this masterclass. Arvind is passionate about working with organizations to help them improve their employee experience by designing and implementing new age HR delivery methodology. He has vast experience in digital tools, platforms, and optimizing HR delivery model. Arvind strongly believes that HR is a science, and we're going to hear more from him on this topic today on impactful rewards. Joining Arvind is Smriti Bhatt, co-founder and chief operating officer at Advantage Club. After a successful corporate stint, Smriti decided to board the entrepreneurial bandwagon in 2014. To her credit is the transformation of the Advantage Club from a small startup to a multi-million-dollar venture. She is most excited to talk about anything HR, business, sales, tech, startups, or if you simply want to enjoy some Harry Potter trivia. It's such a pleasure to have you both join us today.
Thank you, Nitya.
Thank you, Nitya.
Excited to be here.
Lovely. Arvind, you have spent so many years in the people function and have seen businesses grow globally, right? Clearly, the focus is on employees and creating an impactful experience for them. Rewards and recognition have always been a great pull factor, but we see that the definition of rewards itself has become so dynamic in the current times. Would love to invite you to this master session to hear more about your experience and thoughts on what's in focus and impactful rewards. Over to you, Arvind.
Thank you, Nitya. Thank you so much. And just the one thing which I want to share is that once I started my career, we used to always focus on employee engagement. That was the buzzword, but now it's got sort of split into two. There's employee experience and employee wellness, and sort of rewards is the one which is proliferated with both sides, trying to talk about what we do. So I just have a few slides which I want to share and talk about, what we are doing with regard to, and just some of my views on what is impactful rewards and employee wellness. And how I want to structure this is I want to talk about where are we right now, how did we actually get here, and what do we do around that, for which I invite Smriti and have the conversation with her to see what we can do. But just a quick sort of a reflection which is there. When we talk about employee wellness, and this is an image when I searched on Google, I found out. When I searched employee wellness on Google, this is the first image which comes up. It's unfortunately somehow where a little bit confusing is that, is this what we mean by employee wellness? someone who gets up in on the middle of their desk, cross-legged, the mudra is fairly accurate, doing meditation in the terms of middle of a day. Is that unfortunately how it's got categorized to, chastised to, you ask me? I think employee wellness is a larger focus which is there. And we are just trying to find out what can we do as an organization to make sure we touch upon employee wellness, understand more about employee wellness, where is it coming from, and then that'll give us hopefully the answers of what we may need to do to make sure that we have the right wellness strategy to help our employees go, into the right tools, with the right tools rather, to cope up with our everyday life. So you ask me, why do we want wellness now? This is a slide in which this is primarily based on my discussions with some of my colleagues who have been behavioral psychologists, some research scientists, and some anthropologists. So we're talking about the socio-economic factors actually which have led to this wellness challenge which we have right now, and the wellness situation we have right now. And it's not just the pandemic. The pandemic was the accelerator, which I'll touch upon the last one. But if you look at in the last 30 years in India, what's happened is that we have actually grown leaps and bounds as a knowledge-based economy. 40 years ago, you had TCS, Infosys, and all of these companies which were just mushrooming up, not like the way they are right now. So if you look at our IT, ITES, and more if you look at the GIC sector, the global hubs which are there for almost all of the companies, we have so much knowledge-based work which has come into India, and that has ensured that people now need to be more skilled workers compared to let's say process-based industry where everything was fairly clear and written down. We're now in a sector in which everyday work involves thinking, actualizing, and being a lot more involved in your job. So that's one thing which is there as a socio-economic factor in terms of the work itself, which has led to this. There are 4 more other primary factors which have actually created this situation. The first one is the rapid urbanization. And you can look into it within your organization and you look at it large. There are a lot of us who are first generation or second generation immigrants into urban areas, where we would realize our grandparents, in some cases our parents, spend most of the time in a village or a town where they had so many people around them and everything was fairly set for them. From there, it might be either this generation or the generation before, which has uprooted themselves and come into a completely new area. So here they are trying to grapple with everything as they're making their economic mark also. So that has ensured there's a lot of pressure on people once you're moved out of a comfort area into a completely new area. And more often than not, we've also noticed when I did the discussion is that if you look at the people who have gone to urbanization, it's not necessarily they stick with one city. They're people who have moved around multiple cities. More often than not, what is happening is that is affecting the way people are. That's shrinking the way people have had a wide perception into a different features which are there. So that's one of the key things which is accentuated into this wellness situation. The other 3 ones which is there, one is the intense social pressure, the fear of failure, and the pandemic accelerator. The intense social pressure, I sort of categorize it into 2. One is the pressure of the society itself. If you look at it as a society, what is happening, what is there, and I categorize into 4 Ws. So this is a small study we did about 6-7 years ago, and this is across India and Asia Pacific, countries which got similar time of independence and have population in similar demographics. Everyone here is judged with 4 questions, okay, and those are primarily the image. Either one creates and one asks others to create an image of themselves, or one you use to reflect a projection of yourself. And that's primarily these 4 are: what have you studied, where did you study, where do you work, and what is your title. This 4 W's, as I call, creates a pressure on an individual to make sure which is there. More often than not, we've always had that. Where are you studying? What are you studying? Everyone wants to judge. Everyone wants to do what is your title, where are you doing, what you're doing. And this is there across. In fact, one example I heard is that a colleague of mine was talking about a time when she was going to get her daughter admission for first standard. There's a question on what is the title of, what is your employment title to both the parents. It was a little surprising, but even a school wants to look at the association of what are the parents' titles. So that ultimately becomes a judgmental factor for both sides which are there. That is a very, very critical situation which is now coming up, and that's putting a lot of pressure on people. The third one, if you look at it, is the fear of failure. Somewhere, because of the first one of the rapid urbanization and immigration which is there was always a sense of giving us saying you have to succeed. Anything you take a shot at, you have to succeed. It was not that we had a comfortable situation which is that we didn't have to worry about, okay, there are other options. It was on a lot of occasions made like this is do or there is no other choice. Those sort of a factors actually led to a situation of being very vulnerable with it. That also has accentuated the wellness situation. The last thing we asked me is that these three factors had already started taking its toll, and then we had the pandemic. The pandemic, the initial factors, if you look at it, and I again look at it in two factors, the 2020 and the 2021 one. The 2020 version was more about we were worried about what may happen. So we were worried about job loss. We were worried about if we can go outside. The way the pandemic was represented was that it can be around you anytime. So you stay away from people and everything which was there. That was one side. 2021 with the second wave we saw, and that was such an intense wave. The anxiety level of people went even higher because we were not able to figure out what was happening. All you heard around you, because every person who lived in an urban area was at least aware of someone who was not well. We were hearing about challenges. The anxiety level cut across the board went up high, and it went even higher in people who had to manage situations at work, at family front. I can talk about at least a couple of organizations that I've been speaking to people. Is that there was a time in April and May, if companies were worried about how was the work happening out of India, because people are either not well or they had someone in the family who were not well. So it was a multitude of situations which accentuated. So these four things, if I talk about, are the ones which have pushed wellness to be considered a key factor to be on the discussion table right now. That's what I just wanted to share. I just want to get your views also, and wanted to start a quick poll on Mentimeter. Nitya, if you could share how they can log in. The quick thing is you can log on to menti.com and use this code. And Nitya, if you could share your screen and
Yes, absolutely. Just bringing that up. All right, participants, if I can just request you to pull out your mobiles and log on to www.menti.com. I hope my screen is visible. All right. And here you'll have the first question coming up. Sorry, just allow me a second. It is also there on your chat. Yes, Arvind. Arvind, you had something to share?
No, I don't have anything to share.
Okay.
My bad.
Worries. As I bring up my presentation, please log into www.menti.com, and you have on the chat the code, and my presentation is coming right up. The code is 42686713. As you can see it on my screen now. We want to know what is the main reason companies should focus on employee wellness. We do have a few options for you. Do you think it's higher productivity, branding, market expectation, or social obligation? Well, social obligation, yes. Quite a candid submission.
I think the higher productivity is sort of a very strong indicator of what some of the outcomes you want to get from that. So that's a fair point. ties up to the rewards piece we want to talk.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, I hope the code is visible. We are definitely expecting more responses, please. It'll really help us understand what's running in your thoughts. So what is the main reason companies should focus on employee wellness? And many of you choose to think that higher productivity, yes, a very logical step ahead there.
We have 24 responses and so far. So we have 75 participants. So, I mean, your thoughts will help us curate it a little bit more, and as we grow more into this topic, get in. So, just request, just do give in your opinions. We will completely understand, and it will be helpful.
We'll have this up for a few more seconds, but Arvind, tell me, is this in line with what you have been experiencing in your experience with clients?
It is. So one of the outcomes, if you ask me, so the way we look at it, Nitya, is that if I look at the main reason, if I want to look at employee wellness, it's actually more in terms of, it's a social obligation, if you ask me. Higher productivity is an outcome. Unfortunately, like I said, some of the earlier situations have led to a situation where we want to tackle the outcome first and not look at it from a perspective. And that's a challenge which we face in a lot of organizations also, in saying, how well can we make our wellness plan work also? Like, we have all of these ideas, but how is it actually contributing to the outcome we want also? So it's an interesting, dogma, if I have to say, where do we sort of toe the line to make sure to get the right, impact we want. I think we've got a fair representation.
Yes.
I just go back to
absolutely. Go ahead and share your screen. Thank you so much for your responses there, audience.
I think thank you for that, and then that's a great insight on what we have and where are we right now. And what you have actually mentioned about is actually very fair. We've been able to do that, understand where we are coming from and what is it needed. The only catch to it is where we talk about, and like some of you have pointed out, is that the need for wellness right now is that companies are social systems. You look at all of it, if you look at any of the books like Elephants Can Dance or any of the other organizational, referential books which you talk about, what we all understand that companies are also social systems. And let's be very clear about it, that if people spend somewhere on an average between 33 to 40% of their day in a place, that has more than a contractual relationship. It is an inherent responsibility. Because more often than not, we will see people making friends at workplace, people having, discussions, arguments, everything happens around in the workplace. So it becomes, it is not something we will only do because it gives us something, but it's the fact of the matter is that if someone's giving us so much time and effort, we need to start thinking from that perspective to make sure we get the ideal results. We do not want like the image on the second screen where anyone is just sitting on the desk and doing meditation. We want people to come in happy, cheerful, give a good day's effort and go. That will make sure we have higher productivity than working about it. The productivity part is actually coming out very honestly. And I was reading the Deloitte report, which talks about 80% of Indian workforce reported mental health issues last year. Most of it talks around people taking unplanned leave. They had come to a figure of, I think it was 1.1 billion, which was the loss which had hit because of mental health. And I think we will need to look at it saying, what is not the 1.1 billion which we need to address, but how do we make sure that our employees feel good and we don't need to do a productivity study again. That's the approach we may need to take up. And it's not possible right away, but I think in the long run, every time we plan an approach around wellness, we will need to start thinking about that to make sure that we have that in the frame of mind, saying, hey, as an employee, what are you doing for them? What can we do for them, which is making sure that they're good in the organization and they're good. So they become brand people and spokesperson for you at any time. The next one is again a Mentimeter question. You can log on to menti.com and use the code 426867113. Nitya, do you want to share your screen for that? Right.
Well, personalization is widely the ask, but
yeah.
not many believe that it can be personalized. All right.
Correct. The code is 42686713 for people asking on chat. Okay.
I hope the code is visible on screen. It's 42686713. You will have to log into www.menti.com and use the code 42686713. And we are trying to understand if personalization of wellness is possible. And many of you feel that, yes, it is.
Right, that's a fair response, and that's actually a good response, and I feel all of us are in a good position where we're able to believe that personalization is really possible now of wellness.
Interesting. Clearly, we know who the winner is. So, but at scale, Arvind, that would be the next question, I'm sure. How do different organizations tackle this personalization, at scale? I'm sure you'll throw some light on that as we move along.
Absolutely. I think personalization, what's happening over here, we think about it is the question of, we are completely aware that one size does not fit all, but
yeah.
The other thing is understanding our population and understanding our audience and then creating, every scheme similar to it. And I was talking to Smriti on the other day about, we were talking about a couple of initiatives which are possible. And even in wellness, when we talk about physical wellness, mental wellness, a yoga session is not an answer for everyone. Everyone is different in that regard. So there are two levels to it which we want to think about. One is on the maturity of the organization, and the second one in terms of offering. So, which is where I want to, delve upon in the next thing. So, if you're good, yeah, I think we can stop. Nitya, I can just share my last few slides.
Yeah.
All right. So when I look at a wellness strategy, there is, one overarching principle which is there. That's something we may need to relook at it. So our workplace in terms of demographics is fairly varied, and that's where we need to look at. Have we thought about how many are, let's say, rural based, people who are there, like I said, first generation migrants, so people who have lived within city. And when we talk about anything around financial wellness, how do people respond to it? You say a corpus fund at retirement and you say that's 3.5 crores. People more often than not are shocked at the number itself. So it's hard enough. So sometimes how do we make it very simple is something which is there. So it's about the slide, it's about the image as I said, it's about equity and not equality. Do we have enough programs and do we make sure we communicate enough about it so that each person feels, this is the one I need to do. Even if I do something on physical wellness, do I have a beginner, intermediate, and let's say an advanced stage? Or do I support them who are in various stages? That's fairly essential because you want them to stay on that journey. You want them to do well and make sure that they were able to get rewarded out of it. That is fairly, fairly essential. And that's where we need to look at with one overarching principle. Do we have enough, offering? I look at it like a buffet spread. Do we have enough offerings for each of them to feel happy? Do we have enough offerings for each of them to feel interested and welcome, so that they are able to look at it, understand and use? So even at scale, the only answer I'd say, Nitya, is that make sure we have enough offerings, think about our population, then curate the offerings, and making sure that they're aware about it, encouraging them to make sure they utilize it so that they are able to utilize it well. The other thing which I was also talking about is the fact that, we also need to look at this time, how are we, doing with regard to the various workplaces, demographics, also in terms of gender. One key thing, if you look at it, how many of us have probably looked at, let's say, financial wellness for women? And this is coming based on personal experience and talking to people. Even the women in the workplace, more often than not, I'm going to say a fair number, if you ask them, they are not very clear about their financial strategy. Those who are, that's great. But their financial wellness and investment strategy, it's a question which is coming up. So what steps are we taking to help them? So we look at one overarching principle, but making sure there's enough spreads to make sure each of them feel involved. That's got to be the key point for me if you look at it, to make sure it's at scale. The last one, which I wanted to touch upon in terms of the slides which were there for me, I think there's one slide also after this. But how do we measure the impact of wellness? If you ask me from an ROI perspective, which I saw the questions on chatbot also, we have some measure to, calculate ROI on the traditional methods, like how much leave, how much attrition. But like I said, it goes back to the fact of how are we looking at it. If it is an inherent social obligation, can we look at some of the new metrics? And some of it was also looking at, there are, this is a funny thing, but when I was looking at one of the first questions, then this was by a very famous employee engagement survey provider. It had the question, do you have a friend at work? And I thought, okay, why is it needed? But as you've lived in and as you grow inside an organization and as you want to do well, we've all realized that it's a social system and people need to have relationships, people need to feel comfortable. Do we now think of some of these new metrics we look at, where we see, hey, do you have a friend at work? Is your work your safe space? Because I've been part of organizations where, and I've also been in situations in consulting where I've seen there are people who literally come to work as a safe space, running away from some of their problems. I've been part of an organization where we used to offer, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. There'd be people whose compensation and whose economic situation was in such a disarray, they would want to come to the workplace and they felt that was a safe space. So are we looking at a time in the future? Do we want to measure these? Is your work your safe space? Because if I feel safe at work, then that is inherently going back to Maslow's theories. I'm going to have larger productivity. I'm going to be in a better position. So is it time we start thinking about it? Because some of these metrics which are there are the traditional metrics, but do we now think about it to see how does that actually work out and how does that actually respond to it? That's the question, I would say to people, if we try to measure, wellness with regard to our old metrics, that's like, a round peg into a square hole. That's going to be a very, very hard challenge, which is that you may eventually fit it, but you will not be able to get always the answer. So that's the point which I was talking about. The last slide which I have, which is primarily on the rewards and wellness. I think one key component is also in HR, who takes ownership of wellness. Is it a certain function? Is it HR business partner? Is it a COE? I think what it all boils down to is the fact of how we are placing wellness, and I see wellness as a separate COE, but primarily aligned with rewards. I think it's very, very important that rewards and wellness are hand in hand with each other, because I look at it, like I said, in two components. For wellness, which is there with rewards, one is the support and second is the recognition. And this is where I talk about it, and I had a conversation with Smithy and some of the folks in our team, is that companies are at various levels of maturity when it comes to wellness and when it comes to rewards. Some companies and some employees are at a maturity level where they just need the incentive to make sure they are staying on track. Some of them where we may need to give them a sort of a push in the back to, they are on the path, but they need consistency in moving forward. Some we may need to go down to even the basic level to help them come on to this path. So that's at different levels of maturity, various organizations, various employee groups are. And at each level, this will be very, very helpful for us. So So that's why I said it's a support and a recognition. One is identifying the support based on the maturity and then making sure that we are able to give them. So if it's about, let's say, mental wellness, how do we make sure we give people, mindfulness? And if there's someone who's actually had a bad situation, how do we give them, EAP or support which is there? So with different audiences, how do we curate which is there? That's in terms of support. The second is in terms of recognition. This is a very subtle component, but very important component, if you ask me. We all like to be rewarded for the work we have done. We're all gregarious creatures. It's paramount for us to be recognized and understood which is there. So how do we want to make sure that people are appreciated for what we do? But people may not want to share everything about that. So making sure again we have the safe space, or we have enough of a situation where only certain people are aware. So let's say if we know about a certain individual who's gone through a tough challenge, okay, who's lost, let's say, someone and is going through a phase of mental struggle, anxiety and panic. How do we make sure that the supervisor knows, the supervisor can help them, and supervisor can also recognize them when they see they have been able to manage it? That's just one part, and it's just the supervisor alone, and they do not make it public. I think that is also fairly essential to make sure that people are able to understand and give them the recognition. If someone has done physically well for themselves, how does someone else want to come in and recognize them for that? That's something we may want to do. I've been part of organization where there just used to be sort of a cash reward campaign for wellness. In a word, literally like how there used to be that episode in The Office where the people who lost the maximum number of weight got money. I don't think that's going to work any longer because of the way we are defining even physical wellness. But the fact is, how do we say to someone who's taken upon themselves to get better, just to go in and say a simple thank you? You may or may not be cash, but it's just that reward piece which is there. Let's say even if you have the theme of congratulating people around, who've been taking that effort to make themselves better, I think that can go a very long way. So it's very, very essential as an organization, if you're able to identify these two and work it out with a larger strategy, we will be in a good position, able to explain to employees what are wellness strategies, and able to explain to our management saying, hey, this is how we are envisaging wellness. This is how we want wellness to be positioned within the organization. And this is the outcomes we think we will be able to achieve. So it's not something we can do on the short term. It is a progressive journey. But I think if we are able to understand where is the outcome and how do we want to do, and know our people, know our employees, and that's somewhere I keep coming back to, know our employees, and we're able to do that, I think we will be in a very good position as HR to give answers to all of our stakeholders, and we should be able to do that. So that's the quick presentation. I won't say it's quick, but that was a presentation and which I wanted to share with all of you. Happy to take in the questions and answers, but I just hand over to Smriti and Nitya to continue this next part of which is there for the agenda.
Thank you so much, Arvind, and many of our audience also echo my thoughts. That was extremely insightful. But we are all brimming with questions. Yes, so please be ready for more coming from all of us. Thanks so much. I'd once again like to welcome Smriti from Advantage Club onto the panel. And some very interesting thoughts coming up on chat, which I would want to relay as we move along. Audience, thank you for your questions. Please keep sharing your thoughts as well with us. So it's very interesting to see that, we are all in sync here. Yes, questions on ROI, questions on taking this up on scale, we'll be answering one-on-one as we move. But Smriti, let me invite you first to understand, your perspective on why do you think that, this wellness is taking center stage. Of course, Arvind spoke about it, but I want to understand your perspective as well.
Yeah. So, like Arvind mentioned, a lot has changed from what used to happen probably pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. And I don't think it's just COVID. While it's one of the reasons, there are many other reasons which I define in like three parts. The first is, of course, everybody knows the COVID pandemic itself, right? So what happened during the pandemic is it actually made people realize the importance of wellness. Like, if I look at people today, they're like, okay, you have a flu, it's okay, you're probably okay. As long as it's not COVID, it's all right. So, the sensitization of wellness actually happened post the pandemic. There's also, there was always this taboo associated with things like mental wellness. Now, you put like, 4 people in a house in the same home and like a house arrest kind of a thing for 1 year, and they realize that mental wellness is not a taboo, it is a real thing, right? So people, I mean, it's probably not something to joke about, but there have been so many divorces during this time. I mean, people have just eaten each other's heads and pulled each other's hair out, because everyone realized, okay, everyone needs their own space, everyone needs their own mental wellness as well. And hence therapy became more normalized. Talking to your problems to somebody also became more normalized. So that itself created an instant recognition towards the whole wellness aspect itself. And the third part about the pandemic was, almost everyone I know today has had COVID or probably has been asymptomatic, and COVID has long-term impact. So even when you get recovered, it keeps coming back in some of the other ways. You eat something cold and you feel that, okay, I'm sick now. So that has been another reason why wellness has become so important today post-pandemic. Second reason which I feel has changed is there's been a general liberalization of the economy, right? If you, like Arvind also mentioned, our grandparents used to work for survival, right? Our parents used to work for security, but today's liberals, they actually work on improving their quality of life. And wellness becomes a very important factor when you're looking at quality of life improvement, where, and millennials today, the liberals today, they have more options than they want, and there are enough opportunities to switch, and they want their they want their journey and their life to be happier as well as healthier, which is also made, since it is important to the people. Organization, what is an organization? It's a cusp of people, right? So it's also become important to organizations. And third reason for me, I feel that again, there's been enough hullabaloo on the great resignation, right? So we've seen people switch like anything, which has never happened before in the past. And it's not like we do not have enough jobs. There are enough jobs for talented professionals today. I mean, people who are cribbing that there aren't enough jobs, probably they need to increase their talent structure today, because if you look at from an organization's perspective, there is a pool of talented people and everybody wants to hire them. So for those talented people, companies are fighting among each other, and that has also made organizations kind of up their ante, and they have to increase their standards in terms of making employees feel better, feel happier in the workplace, because salary is no longer your retention policy. And I think these are the 3 reasons why wellness has become so important.
Thank you so much for that, Smriti. So and so rightfully said, right? I mean, I think salary has become a hygiene. Now, no one wants to talk about that anymore. I mean, talk more is what they say. Interesting thought on the chat also from Mona Lisa, when on the point that, need for wellness. She says that she completely agrees that productivity impact is an outcome. However, social obligation should not be a driving factor either, since happy or well employees totally represent the brand that they are from. It reflects big time on the organization brand and how prospective candidates view existing employees for stress and stuff. And I don't think you could have said that any better. Completely agree. And in a world where word of mouth still continues to travel and holds a lot of weightage, I think this is very critical. Any top of the mind thoughts, Arvind, on this?
That's very, very good thought. And I think about it because there are 2 things to it. And just touching about what Smriti also said, I think word of mouth is way more important. And what we've also realized that an organization is a fairly large place. Within a company itself, you could have, functions which are good. I think where we are now is with such a connected world. I know at least when people look for jobs, they talk to someone who's in that function itself, say, hey, how is that function? Okay, you could be in a company where they're like, hey, this function is not great, but this function is good. So it's become where, it's become even more compartmentalized. People are able to understand that. So that's where we talk about, making sure we have that. If you think about 10, 12 years or even 15 years ago, the reason why a Google or a Microsoft is well known is their office had everything. It had laundry, it had sleeping pods, it had everything. All of that, if you look at it, is a factor of wellness. It's like, hey, we're taking care of you. They were just like, hey, you come work, everything else for your life, we will take care of you. Is it a good or bad thing? It's judgmental, but that's the way we said we are taking care of you. And that's where they were the aspirational list. Everyone wanted to, oh, that's a company which is looking after me. And I remember when I was in the US and we were talking about it. The fact is, Google was one of the first companies which offered spa treatment as a reward option. Okay. Imagine that's the way they understood and said, hey, you've had an amazing work. Why don't you go and get a spa treatment? And that's where it clicked, and employees are like, whoa, this company sort of understands me and wants to give me that option. That obviously trickled down into the Valley, Silicon Valley, and everyone started doing it. But that's just the way it's coming down to in terms of it. So it's more of, how do you position it? Just not an obligation, but rather it's the inherent responsibility.
Yeah. So well said. Thank you, Arvind. While I do have my set of questions, but I think the audience have quite a few, so I'm just going to jump in to take those first. So Krishna Prasad wants to know how to measure ROI on wellness initiatives. That still seems to be an enigmatic topic. Is it so?
Yeah, I don't think we have the answer to it right away. Yeah, if you look at it in terms of some of it, it's like I draw a parallel to it. It's like when you are in marketing, you ask how much has an advertisement made an impact. You put a good TV ad, does it always ensure your sales are up? Or is it helping you in your brand building cause? Where you say you made advertisement now, but it would culminate to it a little later. Like I said, some of it is the metrics we want to look at in terms of you can represent it with some of the metrics in terms of attrition, in terms of well-being. But I think the next level, what I spoke about, is something we might need to look at. Let's say, if someone's come back from a tough situation, let's say someone's taken a bereavement leave, and how long do they want to stay back? Or let's say if someone's taken an unplanned leave, and then what is it? Are we able to help to make sure they're in? So I think we will now need to look at this factor, saying if this is coming up to the center stage, what are the other things with which we can represent it properly? We may not be able to use the same old metrics for it, but I think we will need to now start having the discussion. It is not going to result in overnight tomorrow, but it will need to start resulting into some of the discussion saying, hey, we have done all of this. I think we'll be better. Some of it could be just even employee testament saying, hey, thank you for helping me understand financial wellness, and I now have a financial portfolio. Some of those which are there. So that's how it is going to come. It's not going to come overnight, and it may not be the overall metrics, but I think as a society, we are able to keep pushing ourselves, we might be able to be at a point where, hey, these metrics are the ones which are going to best measure.
Absolutely. I think what I hear you clearly say is definitely understand the maturity curve that the organization is and try and map your own success. There cannot be an external person coming and establishing that success metric for you. So definitely start off from sensitization, start off with creating that awareness for your people. And that's a great first step. And you can, build along. Smithy, you have worked with multiple clients on such challenges. So how do you think people make a success out of this? How do they measure ROI, or how do they even define ROI?
Yeah, I think the first thing which companies need to identify while driving any wellness program is, why are you driving it? Like, what is the objective of actually doing this? Are you doing it because your competitor is doing it, or you heard from some other HR doing it in the market? You need to identify the pulse of your organization. And I've seen companies, whenever they design like good wellness programs, the first thing they do is identify what do they want to give to their employees, and how does that match with their core behaviors, core values, and what the employees want. So the first step to designing something should be to identify that. And different ways of doing that, right? You can always do feedback campaigns. You can always, do group surveys in which you do like focused groups, and you identify, you take, responses from employees and identify what exactly works and what doesn't work. And more or less companies know about it. Like sometimes companies come to us and say, we have a great biking culture. And how do you know that? Obviously, you know that because you've seen that happen in the company. So I think more or less companies know about it, but there are other ways of identifying it as well. Once you've identified it and once you've actually implemented it, there is a constant need to track them as well. But like Arvind said, there is no there is no mantra that I can just say that, okay, you do this and you'll know whether it's working or not. But you can always split the responses or the ROI in different types of buckets. Like one bucket could be like, scoring of the whole thing, like maybe employee satisfaction scores or engagement scores. And you identify that how happy employees feel. A lot of companies do mood meters. They identify, how people are feeling every day. And then there's like an average which is generated monthly that, okay, this is how people have felt throughout the month. There are also situations where, if you have like given a choice to an employee, if you're giving, say, wellness rewards and you've given a marketplace option to employees, identifying whether people are actually using those wellness rewards or not also becomes a very definitive ROI. So typically we recommend that your redemption rate should at least be 90%. Otherwise, that should be the baseline you should be targeting for. Because if you're giving money, if you're spending on employees, but nobody's using it, then it's not because, either there is an awareness issue, or it is the fact that the choices which you have given are not good enough for them. And that's why nobody wants to use them. And thirdly, I think some companies have also, inculcated this in their exit interview process. So when an employee is leaving, they always give an unabashed feedback. They're not worried about anything at that point in time. So if you implement it in your exit interview and you identify and you ask people that, okay, how did you feel about this initiative? They'll be more honest than what they would have been while they were working. And of course, there's the holy grail, which is attendance and attrition. But there also, the way to identify whether a program has actually impacted your attendance and attrition is you identify the set of people who have actually taken part in the program, and you identify the set of people who have not taken part in the program. And then you see the attrition difference between both sets. So if there's a difference between both sets, that means this initiative has actually made an impact in changing something. So I think these are the 4-5 ways in which you can try to acknowledge it. But I don't think there is like a set formula to do that as well.
Absolutely. So data, and more data and insights from data is what is going to get you there. Of course, there's a lot of technology support also, which really makes it very easy for us to track these things, and also course correct to align our solutions to what your employees want at the end of the day as a solution. Wonderful. Thank you. So to our question on whether personalization is possible, there's been a resounding yes. Lakshmi Narayan, Nisha, Ashraf, Amar, and Myra, who works in this wellness space, says that yes, it's absolutely possible to personalize. Very interesting to know that. Gargi has a question on, are there existing wellness companies which help measure the wellness of organizations and then at the individual level? To an extent, Smriti, you answered that question, but Gargi, yes, there are in fact assessments also that can help you, really pinpoint on what is your wellness quotient. And that's not only on mental and emotional wellness. There are multiple dimensions of wellness. There's financial, there's physical, there's social, emotional, at least 9 to 10 different dimensions. And yes, each of these individuals can get an individual score on these aspects. That's definitely possible. Smriti did answer a large part of your question, Gargi, on how, such organizations do that. Anything more that you would want to add on, Arvind or Smriti?
So if you're looking at wellness calendar, like you mentioned, there are organizations. And I think one thing which is also there is in terms of understanding from a company perspective, what do they want to, what do the employee want? So you have to sort of finalize that, make sure you have a clear line of demarcation, and then utilize that so that we are very clear. So there are organizations, there are metrics, and then once you're able to finalize that, and then you can do it. That's the sort of opinion end.
Super, thank you. All right, Shama has a question and wants to know that how can we sensitize about wellness through internal communication? Will sharing wellness content with employee be helpful? Do you think that will really create that nudge? There's already so many emails, so do you think they'll be excited enough to get there? I think that's what he wants to know.
So I'll take a stab at it first.
Yes.
Emails are becoming an email overload. So, if you ask me, it can be rather in terms of, one is having the open channel of communication. The second is it could be just be posters. I remember, as strange as it is, but in one of the places where we were doing a consulting workshop, there were actually mental health posters in the washroom. In the washroom, say if you are feeling odd, or if you're feeling ugly, or you feel this is the most comfortable space, talk to us here. So it's about understanding where do people want to go, probably in the most visible places. If we are back to office in our coffee spaces, in some of the, or sometimes in screensaver mode, or just in conversation. So how about normalizing it in a town hall, just saying, hey, is everyone feeling good? If not, we have some options. Talk to your manager, talk to this, so that you could really make sure that it feels normalized. It doesn't need to have a differentiated feel. So that's
Yeah.
the one thing which I've seen as best practice and can be done in terms of the perspective, in terms of how do we communicate.
Superb. Thank you so much. Mona Lisa also shares her thoughts on need for wellness. She says that productivity impact is an outcome. However, social obligation should not. Sorry, I think I delayed this already. Okay, moving on. Deepesh has a question. What should be the wellness policy and how a genuine engagement can be created between the workforce?
I think we need a couple of hours if you want to because wellness policy at large is, I don't think we can define a wellness policy then. I think all we can just have is a tagline. If you ask me in terms of, it's got to be the company's motto or the mantra of having a good working atmosphere and a good working place. So it could be as simple as some of these things like, is your workplace a safe space? Or the policy around it, like you said, there are so many levers around it, it's hard to define. And you definitely miss out something. But I think one overarching principle can help your actions. That's the best way possible.
Right. And I think you've, Arvind, answered Mahalakshmi's question also, who says that, there's no one size fits all, but is there a framework or an approach to understand wellness? I think that's where some bit of reflection in introspection needs to be done on, what will define wellness for your people, and where does your organization stand at this point in time? What are some of the quick actionables for you to get started on this journey, so on and so forth. All right. So Shalini wants to know that today we have the Gen Z millennials as the majority of our employee. They come with the expectation of instant gratification, high expectations. So how do we balance that? Smithy, would you want to take a stab at that? And of course, Arvind, Smithy, either of you.
Sure. So I'm trying to find that question actually.
Yeah, sure. So Shalini wants to know that we have the Gen Z.
Millennials. Got it.
Yeah.
There are too many questions. It's just
I know.
Yeah, it's exciting, it's nice to see so many questions.
Absolutely.
Buzz on this topic. Charlie is absolutely right. Today's Gen Z wants everything instant. They don't want to wait to get something. I mean, the whole ideology of rewards has also been created from the fact that nobody wants to wait till annual appraisals. They will attrite by then, right? So typically, from a instant gratification expectation, there are multiple ways you can tackle that. So the first thing is you identify, if you want to gratify your employees and if you want to really create a budget or some monetary incentives for wellness, first identify what that budget is. So industry standard typically is between 1 to 5% of an employee's CTC, which typically companies put. It could be 1, it could be 3, it could be 5, and it usually depends on the band level of the employee. So if it's a higher salaried employee, obviously the gratification will be tending towards 1. If it's a lower salaried employee, the gratification will be tending towards 5. So once you've identified that per employee budget, you have kind of created an annual budget for yourself. You have to then get budget approvals and all of that finance stuff happens in the back end. We all don't love it, but we have to go through it, right? Now you've identified your budget and then you divide that budget across quarters or you divide it across different initiatives. Whether your initiatives are performance related or whether your initiatives are, say, a certain specific occasion related, you define those. Now, do you want to define something for anniversaries? Do you want to define something for family? Do you want to define something for performance rewards? Do you want to do something around sport? So those instant gratification policies are then created accordingly. And again, as a company, you more or less know what you want to start with and what you want to define it. And how you want to define rewards is, again, it's a separate topic. I think it will take an hour additional. But right. Once you defined those, then you attach small rewards to those budgets. So maybe if you are doing something around anniversary, it comes with a different reward, a different certificate, a different setup. And you give autonomy to the managers to either give those rewards themselves, or you give that access in the hands of the HR. Again, it all becomes part of policy building. And once that is done, you can pick up like either a digital platform, or you can also do it on your Excels and emails yourself, and then start driving those. So, and employees need to be informed that what you need to do to actually get the award. What kind of behavior do you need to drive to get that gratification? And when people know what they need to do, then they'll do it to actually get that
Absolutely.
particular
Yeah.
gratification. And then it becomes very seamless to drive it automatically.
Superb. Lovely thoughts coming on chat and on the platform as well. But I'm going to quickly swift through a few. This is going to be rapid fire. So Arvind, Vijesh wants to know that as a general assessment from your side, how much percentage of employers in India have actually started treating employee wellness as a priority? Any quick numbers that comes to your mind?
I would say about 60%. At least
Wow.
all of the global companies have now put it on their forefront. It's part of their global agenda. So I'd say 60% of the companies have.
Wow, wonderful. That's interesting. Mona Lisa says that the top takeaway from the session for her is great thought on visual impact management that you shared. Arvind, thank you so much for that. Smriti, there's a specific question to you. Where do you see the future of workplace wellness in the Indian context?
So
This comes
one
from
thing
Lily.
is, so there are two things changing in India today, and I've seen this in the past 5-6 years, whatever I've been working for. So one thing which has changed is overall the normalization of spending on employees on wellness. Like 5 years ago, what people used to spend on is, okay, you have an insurance partner. That partner is going to do one wellness campaign like once a year. There is a general wellness test package which everybody gets. Employer pays like 2,000 rupees per employee for that, and you're done. So what is changing now is that now I don't want that general test, right? If I am a woman, maybe I want something related to, say, maybe a hormone test, something related to that. If I'm a smoker, I want a smoking cessation test. So one size does not fit all anymore. So one thing which will change and is already changing in the future is the categorization of wellness and giving that choice to an employee. Don't give me like a Gold's Gym membership. I will never go there. Give me an option to pick in whatever. I mean, I would prefer a yoga trainer or somebody else come in my house. So that is one thing which is changing. Second thing which will change in the future in wellness is one of the focus on beyond full-time workers, contracts, contractors, gig economy, even your not just your white collars, even your blue collar wellness focus is becoming more important. This is also going to change in the future, where systems will have to adapt to go beyond your current full timers and also start adapting to people who are not on payroll, who are actually being paid by third parties. So I think these two things are going to definitely change in the future.
Thank you, and very, very impactful points there. You touched upon a very interesting thought, and yesterday when we were having our internal discussion, Arvind, you touched upon a beautiful thought on what financial wellness or any well-being mean for women. So definitely would want to spend the last few minutes, picking your brains on that, please.
So thanks. And this is something we thought about, Nitya, is that, when we look at, like I said, the demographics also with regard to how women, not just everywhere, everyone we look at it now, as more women come into workplace, the physical wellness, mental wellness, the financial wellness is something which is there. And we think about it. So as an organization, does your organization help women to say, hey, what is your financial future? Where do you invest your money? More often than not, when we did a quick survey, and this is not with my company, but with multiple people, more often than not, say about 40 to 50% of women said, A, either they don't have an investment plan or they trust the male member in the household to make the investment plan, which is not fair, because if you ask the male member, may not most likely do that. So we should think about helping, making sure that people are coming to the same place. And that also gives you that confidence. If you think about it, someone who has their financial future secure will be a little bit more not worried about every single thing. It just cuts back into a lot of aspects, and that's why I always think about, which Smriti also talked about, what level of maturity are you in an organization? Do you want to give a membership, but what if you are giving a Gold's Gym membership to someone who doesn't even work out? For them, do you need to give them what's the basics of fitness? Do you need to walk, 5,000 steps? I think that's very efficient. So we need to go demographic. One place, like I said, and that's fairly close, is making sure that women in the organization, women in society, know more about money, know more about investing, because that's really empowering, if you ask me. And that's the way, we can bring up an empowered society and empowered workforce.
Absolutely. And an extremely powerful point that you've made there. So audience, please do take note. I think this is a very, very critical aspect of really empowering, women and, not only women and organization at large, but it's definitely more applicable for women, because culturally we are so tuned to, having someone else take care of that for me, although things are changing. But yes, it is definitely in our interest to, bring about that empowerment, spread that knowledge, sensitization and awareness around this. Thank you so much, Arvind, for touching upon that. Okay, last 30 seconds, Smriti. Varsha wants to know that for startups who are very tech savvy, what could be the starting point to initiate wellness initiatives? Shoestring budget, mind you, startups.
For startups, the first, simple thing which you can start with, again, it depends on the budget. Like startups don't have a lot of budgets. So the first simple thing you can start with is assigning, for mental wellness, assigning a mentor to every employee. So a person you can actually go to unabashedly, ideally somebody from your HR team who can take care of these things. Now I'm talking about zero budgets. Okay, here you don't have to spend any money. So there is one maybe person who you can talk to for any problems related to anything, to everything. If you want to spend budgets, you can also define small budgets for employees, like on doctor consultation, for example. We do that internally as well. So there is like a free doctor consultation given to all employees, one consultation per month. So, having a lot of partners in the market, we're able to kind of get a good deal. But we also provide this to other startups as well. So give them an option to get one free consultation every month digitally itself. To start off with. And thirdly, you can also try to figure out ways to, for startups, I think the most important thing to fix is the work-life balance. So if you are giving a very stressful environment to employees, the way to counter it, I'm not saying, reduce your work. The way to counter is to add more recognition on top of that. If I am going above and beyond my work, give me some recognition in a social manner, reward me, tell me that I'm a better, I'm doing a good job and I can do better in so and so ways. That is again a very non-monetary or very small amount given to performers, a way to drive them to do even better in the company without feeling more pressured and feeling that I'm giving so much to this company, but the company is not giving me anything back.
Sure. Thank you so much, Smriti. Raj, your question on whether well-being is here to stay as a trend or will become a basic part, definitely not. Last 60 minutes, I think we've been discussing that no, this is here to stay and it's no trend, this is a necessity. So thanks so much for that question. Last question to you, Arvind. Does wellness as a responsibility lies with HR or the managers, is what Soumya wants to know.
I think it's going to go down as policies right now, where we'll be custodians of it, but it'll be the organization who has to own up wellness. You look at, like I said, Microsoft or a Google, it's not HR which does it, it's the whole organization. So it'll eventually be the whole organization which will, that will be the way we percolate down to, I'm hoping another 5 to 6 years.
Yep. And while the organization can provide some extremely good environment, great benefits, but end of the day, it all boils down to the individual. Somewhere there has to be the self-motivation to take up. There has to be the self-motivation to go and use that, gym membership or whatever that works for them. So thank you so very much for being such a wonderful audience. Thank you so much, Arvind and Smriti. With that, we will call this an extremely interesting and enriching evening. Thanks so very much, all of you, for joining us today. Have a lovely, lovely evening.
Thank you, Nitya. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
See you.